Good everybody. It is 5:30, and with that, Commissioner Watson asked to be excused this evening, so we will go ahead and get started with the agenda. Work session is open. Ed, it's yours.
Sure. Thank you, Commission. I'd like to take a minute and introduce Chris Chardella, our city engineer. He's helped on he's been the project manager on this project, and then our consultants, PEC, Kristen Zimmerman with PEC, and then Suzanne Loomis, also with PEC. So I'm going to let PEC kind of just take over the reins from here, and then if there's questions as we go along, then we can stop or we can wait till the end, whatever works best for PEC.
Okay.
Want them to stop us if they have questions?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. Please stop us if you have questions. Okay. Well, very good. Well, good evening, Mr. Mayor and Commissioners. Appreciate you inviting us out for an update today. Want to thank Chris for being a great project manager and Ed for inviting us out for an update today. So Suzanne and I are here for just to sort of provide an update on where we're at with the Safe Streets for All, or the Transportation Safety Action Plan. Again, my name is Kristen Zimmerman. I am the project manager for this. I am a transportation planner by trade, and also the team lead for PEC's planning and GIS group. Suzanne, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, Suzanne Loomis. We've met before. I'm a project manager on the market side at PEC, and so I get involved in all types of projects, transportation being one of those because of my varied background from working in a municipality. So we've got a lot of stuff to cover with you tonight, so bear with us and we'll give you an update where we've been and where we're headed. So
Okay, well, sounds good. I think probably most of you are familiar with PEC, or Professional Engineering Consultants. This is just a brief introduction to our company. So we're headquartered down in Wichita. We're proud to be really one of the only full-service engineering firms headquartered in South Central Kansas. You can see there we have about 400 employees and several satellite offices across the region. So we are very, very diverse in our expertise. Now let's get to this particular project. So the Safe Streets for All initiative is a relatively new initiative that's been rolled out by our federal government. This is a new program that's providing funding for both planning and capital projects to local governments all across our country. The goal is, from the federal perspective, is to reduce fatalities and serious injuries that are happening on our public transportation network. So whether that be highways, local streets, township roads, sidewalks and parks, really looking at the entirety of the network to reduce fatalities and serious injuries, which you can think of as an injury that happens on the transportation network that causes you to, a life-threatening injury that causes you to need to take an ambulance to the hospital. That's what a serious injury is. So from the federal perspective, that's the goal, is to reduce these all across the United States on the entirety of the public transportation network. Again, whether that be owned by the state DOT or KDOT in our case, or a township, a gravel road, a township road, really looking at the entirety of the network and really looking at the entirety of all users of that network. So whether you drive a passenger car and you're running errands, or you drive a semi-truck as your job, or you drive a farm implement, or maybe you're walking or bicycling or in a wheelchair, it's really trying to look at the entirety of the users across the entirety of the network to reduce these fatalities and serious injuries. And I will say, from the local perspective, it's really an opportunity to reevaluate your particular roadway street network. You know, a lot of our streets across our country and Newton were put in decades ago and have worked very well to support the land uses and the neighborhoods and commercial areas during that time, have really worked well. But as we know, cities change, counties change, neighborhoods change, commercial areas change, and so it's really an opportunity to kind of reevaluate your system and say, is our network working for us the way we need it to now and in the future? You know, one thing in particular we've definitely noticed here in Newton in particular is there's a lot of demand for pedestrian and bicycling facilities on a network that isn't really designed for that. So that's one change that's been for sure prevalent in this project.
Kristen, the other thing we ought to mention, maybe you have it on your list, but this project isn't just a Newton project. It is a Harvey County and Newton combined. When you applied for the grant, it was a partnership for the grant. And so we've been working with the county as well. So when Kristen keeps mentioning, gravel roads, dirt roads, it's because we also were looking at the county's transportation network as well.
Yes, thank you, Suzanne. Yes, and we wanted to look at this from the beginning from a holistic perspective, from looking at the highway network. But you'll see as we move through this that we're moving toward having sort of two separate plans. One will be for the city of Newton and specifically for your network, and then one will be more for Harvey County, and we're looking at the unincorporated parts of the county. Okay, and I guess lastly, and you'll see there on that second paragraph, this project was made possible by a grant that the city of Newton received, gosh, probably 2 or 3 years ago at this point. It took a long time to get the agreement in place. So that's what has made this possible. So this has come at really no cost to either the city of Newton or Harvey County because the state of Kansas paid the match and there's a federal grant. So I did want to cover just kind of the approach that, this is the approach that we've taken to attack this problem. It's called the safe system approach. This is a relatively new approach when we're thinking about safety. I do have some handouts here that I'm happy to pass around, or if you're interested in this. A lot of us might be familiar with a more technical approach of safety, maybe something like, we have a goal of eliminating all crashes. Well, that's not necessarily the goal on this safe systems approach. It's a people-focused approach, and what we're really looking at is these key principles here of, saying that death or serious injury is unacceptable on our system. That's one key principle of this. Number 2, humans make mistakes. That, we ought to maybe just accept that happens instead of, constantly trying to fight that. Number 3, humans are vulnerable. Relatively same principle there. Responsibility is shared. The safety on the network is shared between individual drivers. The decisions that we all make when we get into our cars. Are we going to put on our seatbelt? Are we going to drive intoxicated? Are we going to drive the speed limit? These are decisions that we all make individually. As well as our car manufacturers have a share in the responsibility, our vehicle manufacturers, as well as, cities like City of Newton in terms of providing the network that we use. So this whole concept of responsibility is shared is a big deal in this approach.
I have a question.
Yes.
Pedestrians have a responsibility as well.
Yes, they do.
Is that really part of this, the education side for?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we will get to that, but yes, exactly, and I'm glad you brought that up. Yes, all users, so whether you're a pedestrian or bicyclist or driver or truck driver or implement driver, we all have a responsibility to know the rules of the road and follow the traffic laws. And then the last one is redundancy is critical. So this is this is just some background, I guess, to provide sort of a perspective of the approach we took when looking at this. And you'll especially see it when we get to some of the concepts and some of the recommendations, really targeting these fatal and serious injuries and preventing them from happening is really a focus here. Okay, so how did we go about doing this study? Well, it's kind of, to boil it down, we kind of had 3 steps. Number 1, what and where are the problems? We need to kind of understand what and where are the problems. Number 2, what and where are the priority problems? And number 3, what are the preferred solutions? So hopefully a fairly straightforward kind of rational approach you might take to any kind of problem. And you can see we're in this last step now. Here's a little bit more detailed view of the process we've taken. So we chose two ways, or kind of two methods, two avenues of answering the questions, what and where are the problems. We took a technical analysis where we were looking at crash data of crashes that have happened on the network. That was data provided by the Kansas Department of Transportation, as reported by the Newton City Police and the Harvey County Sheriff's Office. And then we also took and also looked at other technical data, looked at volumes, had engineering assessments. That was really the heart of the technical approach. And then you can see there we had a community engagement approach. So a big part of this Safe Streets for All program is involving the community, having it be community driven, having it be not just a technical study. Because again, some of it is to sort of get input, but also some of it is to be able to reiterate this notion that it is a shared responsibility of all of us to have a safe network. So we went through and essentially evaluated those. We were able to sort of define the major problems from each one separately, and then we narrowed those down to what are the major ones we want to focus on, both the locations and some behavior or road condition problems. And then now we're in this, what are the preferred solutions? So you'll see a little bit later, we've got some capital concepts as well as non-capital recommendations, things like the mayor had mentioned, education campaigns, or enforcement options. So, and then you'll see for the rest of the project, we're coming up on our next round of community engagement. That's one of the main reasons we want to come here and visit with you tonight, to make sure that you get to see these before they roll out, and you're prepared if your constituents are asking questions about that. Then we'll go through the final vetting, final recommendations, and of course have our final documents that should all wrap up early next year. So like I mentioned, really our goal for the presentation today is really to sort of brief you on what's been happening with this project, the work done to date. Number two, prepare you for this community engagement round 2, and define next steps. So we will be out in the community over the next couple weeks, 2-3 weeks, I guess, and just wanted to make sure you all had a chance to see this before it sort of rolled out publicly. So I'm going to go through this technical analysis summary as well as our community engagement. So the crash analysis is really the heart of the technical analysis. I just put some statistics up there just to share some of this with you. So you can see over the last 5 years, for the entirety, or for the city of Newton area, there was 32 fatalities and 56 serious injury crashes that took place on the public network. And then you can see some of those statistics. Really, that bottom one was, 63% of all crashes are occurring on local roads and 37% on the highways. And again, that's all crashes. So KDOT does a really good job of providing this. The data is very detailed. In general, it's sort of divided into fatal crashes, injury crashes, and property damage only. So that you can think of that as like maybe you backed into a tree in your yard, or you had a fender bender with the person in front of you.
Does Denise have a copy of this presentation she can send out to us?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Thank you.
And we have a lot more data that we're happy to share. I've sort of just weaned the most important things for tonight, but we're happy to share more information if you'd like to dive into this a little bit more.
The other thing to remember is when we started this process, we were just into 2025, and so the data that was available was that 5-year period from 2020 to 2024. So if don't go, why are you using old data? Well, that was the data that was available at the time.
Yes, and the 5 years is an industry standard of looking at crash data to get, it's sort of a representative trend. So we took that, we got some of this basic information, we put that into what we called a high injury network, and I'm sort of summarizing a lot of this to get to this end product. Yeah, I skipped those because they were real detailed. So we have more information in the PowerPoint if we want to see some more detail, but essentially we were looking at the spatial distribution of crashes as well as the type of crashes and the contributing circumstances that led to the crashes. as well as an engineering assessment of each location where a crash happened, and sort of compare that with the volumes that were taking place, or the amount of car traffic volumes that were on these roadways. So here were from the technical perspective, sort of the major issues here in Newton. Really focused on the intersections at the local streets. There's definitely a disproportionate risk to pedestrians and bicyclists in terms of sort of serious injuries and fatalities as compared to their representation in the system, their activity in the system. The behavioral factors multiply the severity. We've listed those there: distraction, speed, alcohol, and drugs. For example, if a crash were to happen, let's say a property damage only crash were to happen, when these four other things get involved, the severity, of course, increases. Number 4, urban context increases the risk. That is just sort of an, I'm going to say, unfortunate reality that cities have a lot more activity, a lot more conflict points. There's more intersection, there's more volumes, there's more traffic, there's more people. And in any kind of situation, when you have more of something, the risk is going to increase. So that's just the truth for any sort of urban setting. And then you can see the last thing there are the locations. So these primarily came out of our crash analysis. So I-135 through the city limits, 12th Street, really that corridor south of the high school, Grandview, which is just east of the high school, the Main and 12th Street intersection, Main Street from all the way up at North City limits down to First, Washington, sort of continuing that where it starts, and then Anderson Avenue, north of 12th, also over by the high school, and then Kansas from First to US 50. So those were sort of our top 2 tiers of locations coming out of the technical perspective. Before I shift on to the community engagement perspective, any questions or
Well, I
questions to
noticed
date?
that 2022 looked like the numbers were the highest in 2022, and then they dropped off. Is there, I just wondered what was happening at that time.
I don't, nothing immediately comes to mind. Suzanne has a possible theory.
Yeah, I don't recall the year that KDOT kicked off their Drive to Zero campaign. It may have been in there, so you start seeing more about it. You start thinking more drive safe, more enforcement, those kind of things. I'm not sure the year that it started. It could line up with that.
Yeah,
The
it was
following
just
year.
in the Newton part, not the unincorporated part. The Newton part, I noticed that 2022, those numbers seem to be higher.
Yes, I'm happy to take that back to our team and see if we can get a,
I just couldn't recall anything that was going on at that time, but it's just interesting to see that, why then?
right.
I mean, what was happening in the community then? Was there a lot of issues with streets? Were we working on
Like
streets?
construction,
No.
like a lot of
More
construction.
people driving because it was post-COVID. They were going back to
Yeah.
work.
Yeah,
Could be any number of things.
okay.
Okay, anything else on the technical part or kind of the study introduction? Okay. Okay, here's the same information for the unincorporated part of Harvey County. So the major takeaways from the technical perspective: roadway departure and loss of control crashes, speed and high energy crash environment. You can imagine there's higher speeds out in the county. One surprising thing was a lack of occupant protection. I think our numbers coming in for the county in terms of not wearing a seatbelt or lack of occupant protection was maybe significantly under the statewide average and under the county average, so, or the statewide average and the national average. So that was a surprising thing that came out of this. There's some behavioral factors. Intersection crashes less frequent than Newton, but likely to be fatal. And then we had locations pulled out for the unincorporated part of the county as well. Okay, let's move on to the second perspective was community engagement. So our round 1 engagement was really where we were asking folks about their use of the network. We asked folks about their the heart of this was asking, where is the network safe and where is it unsafe? That was really the heart of this. You can see some of our numbers there in terms of having open houses, stakeholder sessions. We had surveys, some comments, individual comments came in over right around 500. So in addition to the general public, we also had these stakeholder groups where we were targeting people that had expert knowledge in safety. So you can see we really had a really great group with the first responders here in the area. That's from our picture. So we really targeted either folks with expertise, so the first responders or our public works groups, or groups that were especially impacted by how the transportation system functions and or had some sort of stake in it. So you can see the range there, everything from civic groups to teenagers to public and private schools. So really trying to be diverse and representative and go to them, and in these groups we had invitation only small group sessions with representatives from all of these. So really try to get their knowledge and input as well as from the general public.
That was our Bald Fellows Civic Group. Was that group in that?
Yes. The emergency services version.
This was just some stats on our public open houses. We had 5 in total, counting a virtual one. And really the main issues that came out of these community engagement sessions was in terms of behaviors, a lot of concern about speeding, aggressive driving, and non-compliance with traffic laws. You can see about a third of sort of votes were concerned about that. Distracted driving, just right around there also at 30%. Roadway conditions, sort of the top vote getter was, adding pedestrian infrastructure. And then the locations that came out of this, you can see perceived as safe was sort of Main Street, as well as the Sand Creek Bike Path, which is a little bit contradictory because it was an interesting finding. It was sort of perceived as safe, but through our technical analysis, it was rated as a higher crash corridor. So that was sort of a interesting difference. And then you can see the locations perceived as unsafe. A lot of these were, that first one was the same as what we got out of our technical assessment. The community input also added US 50, East 1st Street, east of the interstate, and then the south interchange of I-135 and US 50. So, and again, sort of a similar comments on the bike ped features. Safe is when there's dedicated features, unsafe, when there's activity in a system that's designed for vehicles.
People walking and bicycles.
Okay, so through both of kind of combining this technical and community engagement, we kind of came out with these, what we called major problems. For this one's for Newton, and we have a similar one for unincorporated Harvey County. So you can see here we've got sort of 2 sets of locations. And then we also added some behaviors there and kind of a focus on pedestrian bicycle activity and then intersections, especially the stop controlled ones. Okay, and then for Harvey County, we had a similar list here. So you can see here for the specific locations, the state system had a lot of, really came out on top, and then local system, we had some local roads, county roads listed there, as well as some sort of behaviors and system-wide things to focus on. For example, low seatbelt usage, it's kind of a system-wide thing. So from those 2 data sets together, we took the technical data, took the stakeholder input, and Suzanne and I worked on this presentation together, put together. I just had to laugh. She's the engineer and I'm a planner. And I just had to chuckle a little bit because she put in this equation in the PowerPoint. So we have a math equation there of the technical data plus the stakeholder input, community engagement from the general public. Plus, we really wanted to focus on those things that your local jurisdiction sort of has control over or can control. we wanted to really focus on that, right? We don't necessarily want to have a KDOT, a highway project in here for a recommendation for the city to take on, something like that.
But when things rise to the top that are on the state network, we will be discussing that with KDOT staff. So it won't go,
Yes.
it won't just be thrown aside and nobody talk about it. We will be taking it back to them because we've already met with those folks once.
So we've got two sets of, I guess, what you might call recommendations. So one thing is called countermeasures, and the other one is concepts. So I'm going to cover the countermeasures, and then Suzanne is going to cover the specific concepts at specific locations. So countermeasures, what are countermeasures? Really, this is just sort of a fancy term that means some sort of action or thing you do that reduces the frequency or severity of crashes, especially fatal or serious injury ones, really on a systematic level. So you might think of maybe like an education campaign about seatbelt usage. That's sort of targeted to all users. It's not necessarily at a specific location. Or you might think of sort of a capital project like, for example, rumble strips. This would maybe be more appropriate for a county and unincorporated roadway. Let's think of rumble strips. You know, that's something that could go across the entirety of the network at a relatively low cost. So that's really what these countermeasures are intended to have a big bang for your money. You know, a relatively low cost of something, an application that can be applied across the entirety of the network. So that's really what we're meaning when we say countermeasures. So we've worked with the staff and have come up with countermeasures for all these different categories of things. And I'm going to go just give a few examples so you can kind of get a sense here. So for example, roadway and lane departures. This is something that is one of the things that rose to the surface in the county, the unincorporated county areas. And so for a capital option, like I mentioned, you could do rumble strips along the center line and rumble strips on the edge of pavement line. And really the goal here is it alerts drivers from drifting out of the lane. Probably many of us have experienced these rumble strips. And these have been proven to reduce fatal and serious injury crashes anywhere from, you can see, 36 to 44%, kind of depending on the environment that it's in. So that's a pretty big bang in terms of reducing crashes for a relatively low cost, right? You're not going in and tearing up the roadway or reconfiguring the whole intersection. And then here's an example of a programmatic activity. You could maybe add a line item or a budget for a road safety audit program in your annual CIP or your annual street maintenance budget. And that would say, you would say, hey, we're going to do 5 road safety audits every year. You know, you would set the number and you would say, we're going to really focus on going to specific locations, specific intersections, or we're going to pick 3, we're going to pick 5. Whatever your number is, we're going to pick that many and we're going to go out and we're going to do a road safety audit and we're going to really dive in and see what is going on at that particular location safety-wise.
And there's multiple capital options to treat this contributing factor and multiple programmatic activities. We're just trying to give you some examples, just quickly. We didn't want you to have to be here all night.
Yes. Here's another one for pedestrian bicycles. So if there's a location where pedestrians and bicyclists are, we've got a capital option there of these crossing improvements. You maybe have seen these crossing lights or high visibility crosswalks. Again, lots of options. And then here's a couple programmatic activities of, you know, maybe looking at some sort of policy that covers sort of the responsibility of users as well as kind of the city's approach to, you know, how do you want to account for them as you're building and maintaining your roadway network. Or here's another option is, you know, to partner with the school district or health department. And I know a lot of that's already happening now to do classes and have education on, you know, how to bike or walk under traffic laws.
some of that may already be going on now, but think about the fact that we're trying to put together a traffic safety plan for you. This is a plan for the city to use moving forward. And then that plan gets referenced when you start applying for grants. And so we're trying to match up those factors with some things that you can do that are low cost and put that in your plan and then be able to reference that when you're applying for grants.
Yes, I probably should have said that at the very beginning. That was really the reason for doing this whole plan, is it was a requirement to have this plan done in order to be able to even apply for a capital grant through this program. So probably should have said that at the beginning. I always kind of make a joke, we have to go through this dumb plan to get the project we want to do. So we'll go through this exercise. So last example here was occupant protection. You might remember this is one surprising thing we sort of learned through this, especially in the unincorporated part of the county. So here's a couple of capital options about just really adding a sign or having stations to inspect, child protection seats, car seats, you might know them as, or programmatic activities. KDOT has several programs for, how to support inspecting how car seats are installed. So taking advantage of programs that other groups, other governments or other groups are already doing, sort of promoting those or taking advantage of them. So now I'm going to turn it over to Suzanne, and she's going to talk a little bit about the concepts that were developed. I will say that, so as part of this, part of our scoped effort, we were scoped to develop 5 separate concepts for shared over both the city and the county. And the idea of developing these concepts is that these, whichever one is kind of selected or rise to the top, one could be applied for by the city, and then one could be applied for by the county to get this capital grant that's coming out of this. So keep that in mind, and I'll turn over to Suzanne.
Okay, so the other thing I want you to keep in mind as we look at the concepts, be open-minded. These are not recommendations.
You know it's bad if she's already giving you a disclaimer.
Yes, the engineer's
Okay.
giving the disclaimer. Be open-minded about these. These are not recommendations. These are we are putting forward some concepts that have multiple elements for the public to see, discuss, because remember, we're taking this to the public forum and going to get input from the public. And the items that were chosen based on all of the technical information and then the public input that was put together. And so we're trying to address the things that we think will hit the ability to decrease those fatalities and the severe accidents.
And prevent others from happening.
Yes. So
I might add, it's
Yeah.
safety driven.
safety. These things are about safety. It doesn't always look at, is this best for, the business that sits right here or for the homeowner that sits right
property
here.
owner.
It's looking at the safety on the transportation network. So, okay, there's my qualifiers. We'll roll on, okay? So the first one, we're at 12th Street, and this is up by the high school. So we're going from Boyd over to Plum. And all of these concepts, these are drafts. These are not final plans, okay? And the city has looked at this location on multiple occasions, right? Because there's been lots of comment, not just during this community engagement process, but in the past, there's been a lot of people that have talked about this location. So several of the elements that are being looked at.
And the technical data supports it. It was really in the top tier.
Absolutely, it was in the top tier. So several of the items I'm going to point out to you, we've got all of them on here. You could implement all of them, or we could implement one of them, or you may say, nah, we're not interested in this. And you want to get public input before you make those decisions, right? So one of the items that is looked at along the south side of 12th Street is a bike lane. This is a bike lane that would be going eastbound only, okay? And then there is an option, and in order to put that in, and in order to look at this protected left-hand turn that's running down the middle of 12th Street, and remember, we're going from Boyd, it goes Boyd this direction, and then it picks up, and we're going all the way over here, okay? Here's Grandview. We'll end up farther down, but this is the application for this area. We also would be looking at a protected left-hand turn all the way up to, here's Grandview as it goes to the south. And in order to do that, right now you've got 4 lanes there. So this would shrink it down to that 3 lane in order to get a bike lane on there and have that protected left-hand turn all the way along. What this does, the reason that we look at this location, this was a high accident location. And there's a lot of traffic, there's a lot of young drivers, there's a lot of pedestrians that cross here. Remember, we've talked about that in the past at the city level that are going back and forth across 12th Street. The green that you see on here, this is bike crossings. It's bike and ped going north and south. It's bike only going to the east and west. The other application that is added here is some additional signage that goes along with a 10-foot multi-use path on the north side. So you'd be coming from Boyd and you could take it as far as Berry or you could take it all the way to Main Street. But that is an application that would be considered. And currently, we're not showing any changes to the exit here out of the parking lot for the high school. It's something that could be discussed later if this was selected. And then the other thing to point out is there's another element that is a protected right turn lane into the school if you were westbound on 12th Street and going to be turning in here, because often you will see vehicles backing up along here. And if we're going to shrink it down to only 1 lane in each direction, maybe we need to stack some vehicles in there, and the traffic counts would show that, okay? So that's one element to consider, or multiple elements, one design option there. Then we go farther to the east, okay? So we are going from Anderson, here's Anderson, and then going all the way down over to here's Plum, and then you get right over here, and here's Sand Creek. So it doesn't show on the picture, but just to put it in your mind where we're at. And in this location, there were a lot of comments that we received during the community engagement, plus there had been some accidents throughout this area, but a lot of comments that people are confused because 12th Street is split. And so when you come out in one area, if you're doing one of these cross streets or you're on one of the ends, sometimes people don't know which direction they need to be going, and they may end up going the wrong way. They may be going eastbound when they should be going westbound. And so some of the things that were suggested here was definitely having some improved signage. And you can see there's multiple locations where we're showing different signs that would be added in. And eliminating closing some of these crossings. So at Elm, is a recommended closure, and then at Vine, there's a recommended closure, which just means that somebody may have to turn and then come back to get to where they needed to be. But there are multiple crossings here, and maybe you don't need so many, and that would make it be less confusing for the driving public.
And from a safety perspective, you know, it's sort of balancing access with and so just closing off one entry point reduces a conflict point. You know, that's really the point there. So, you know, if you think about having conflicts with people, you know, if you take one person out of the situation, sometimes the conflict will go down. So that's sort of how I think about on these conflict points. If you can reduce one or reduce a meaningful one, it can really help kind of the overall opportunity for a crash to happen.
Okay. All right, we'll go to the next. Next is Main Street, and we're going to do this in pieces, okay? So the first one is the BNSF tracks to 8th Street. Now, there's multiple concepts here, so bear with me. Here is concept design 1. You notice all these little bulb outs at the intersections. And this has been talked about off and on before. But the purpose of this, because again, lots of crashes that occur along Main Street in this area, and pedestrians. And for years, the city has received comments about it's difficult for a pedestrian to be able to cross the street, okay? And so what this does is it extends that sidewalk out a bit. And it does multiple things. It gives them less distance to have to cross when they're crossing. So that's a pro for your pedestrian, right? That's on the pro side, not the con side. It also puts them a little bit farther out into Main Street because, like right in this area, there's parked cars. And when you're clear back here at the curb, can you guys see my cursor? I'm looking at a curb. Yeah, you can. Okay. So when you're standing back on the sidewalk, you can't see around those parked cars. But if you can get out a little bit farther, then you can see, and your sight distance for the pedestrian is better, and for the people that are driving to see the pedestrian is a little bit better. So that helps with that. And when you put in these bulbs, these bump outs at the intersection, it is a traffic calming device. So the vehicles that are traveling along Main Street, you see a little bit of a neck down, and when you're driving, you automatically go, oh, maybe better slow down because it's more, you know, like I'm threading the needle. They wouldn't be super narrow, but it does slow people down a bit, which helps with transportation safety, okay? Okay, so that's concept design 1.
Kind of option 1.
Option 1 for this piece of Main Street. That's kind of a blown up area so you can see. It extends those out to the opposite side of the parking, opposite the curb side. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't mention that there are some cons to this, and those cons come up when you start looking at drainage, because you've got inlets at those intersections that take on water, and so getting a drainage to flow around that, there'll be some tricks that have to occur in the design. And street maintenance staff, when they're clearing snow, you can't just blade right on down straight through there. You're going to be going around little curved bulb outs, and that'll be an annoyance. So with everything, pros and cons, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, here's concept design 2A. I know these are little on the screen, but we've got things color-coded for you. And for this one, this adds a protected left turn. This protected left turn, right now you only have one, you know, right here at 5th Street. But this adds protected left turn all the way down from BNSF tracks to 8th Street, which what that does for the driving public, you can see that it's offset. So let me go to the bigger, just to look here. So when you're at 8th Street, you see how the turn lane is right here, and it's not in the very middle of the road, it's offset. And that allows the person that is going to be making a left-hand turn that's in the vehicle to be able to see the oncoming traffic so that you aren't turning and ending up with a T accident. So in order to have enough width to gain space for that protected left-hand turn, there has to be a give and a take here. And so in this option, design 2A, remember we're looking at this from a transportation safety. This is traffic safety, what we're looking at. The west side of Main Street, where you see the purple, the parking would be eliminated. There would be no parking on that side in order to accommodate the width for that protected turn down the middle. And when we get to the end here, I'll tell you how many spaces it is that you'd be losing, okay? These are elements. You can pick and choose elements throughout. It may not be popular with everybody.
We're already getting some smiles.
You know,
already getting some smiles.
You know, I know.
I'm like, how did you choose which side of the road?
Well, hang
Wait
on.
till option
Just
3.
a second. Here we go.
We're not done.
Let's look at the cross section, and then we'll move to the next one. So if you're looking at a cross sectional design, you don't have any parking on the left side, but you did gain a little bit of sidewalk because that turn lane is not quite as wide when you take away parking, but you can't park half width of a car, so you gain that other.
Give them a chance, they will.
Maybe, except that it'll be up on the curb, so you gain a little bit over on that side for a little bit wider sidewalk. And I think you've been hearing in some of your comp plan discussions that people want to be able to have more space downtown and more sidewalk interaction and space to sit and walk and congregate.
That was my filter slamming shut.
Yeah.
So I don't say anything.
Again, these are just elements, right? Okay, so here's concept design 2B. What this one does, same thing, you've got your lane going down the middle, you've still got your bulb outs, but they're only on one side. I didn't point that out on the last one. They're only on one side, because if you don't have parking over here, you don't want to have your bulb out, or you would have people driving into that bulb out. This puts the no parking on the east side. So you see the purple, that's the parking on the east side. So it's the same as it was in the last option, it's just flipped. There it is up close, same as the other, just the other side, okay? Looks the same in the cross section, we've just flipped it over. And there's no parking then on the east side, okay? All right, then concept design 3.
Ooh,
This has,
purple.
this has your middle lane
Oh, no.
for turn.
Both
Protection.
sides.
And
What's your phone number?
Uh-oh. Suzanne, we're getting
our traffic,
chuckles.
our traffic engineers have brought this forward as something to consider. The public has an opportunity to comment. This is not a recommendation. This is a concept, and there are multiple elements here. You may just want bulb outs. You may want a turn lane only in one block. You may want, which I would question that a little bit, but it's something to consider. You may decide there's one block that you don't need as much parking. We're just trying to show you the elements of what you can do to help eliminate these conflict points, make the transportation network safer for the walking, biking, and driving public, okay? So this shows no parking, both sides. And then you have definitely, how many times have you been driving along and somebody opens their car door and then maybe that causes an issue? So there's lots of things to consider when you start looking at no parking in a more, and Kristen may smack me when I say this, but in a less rural community, you wouldn't have parking necessarily downtown. It would be maybe behind the businesses, and then the places that you're going to go in and sit, and you might have more tables out front along the sidewalk. That's the thing that you're looking at within your comp plan. I understand that has been some of the things that have been brought forward for you to consider. Just to consider. These are just options, okay? Here's the up close. So, and the next one is the one you really want to look at. So here's your cross section for both east and west. And so you have sidewalk and room for tables, room for people to congregate, and then people can still drive through, you can still get your traffic through, but you would be parking behind instead of along the street, okay? Okay, let's move to the next section of Main Street, from the tracks south to First Street. Same
You
application.
skipped that slide.
What?
You skipped the one that shows how many parking spaces we.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, you're right, I did. I don't know what happened. Okay, so here, this shows parking spaces removed under each option. So 2A, when you remove parking on the west side, it gives you by block the number of parking spaces that are eliminated, total of 50, okay? For 2B, if you remove it along the east side, another total of 50, right? The third one, where there's no parking on the east or the west, of course, you're totaling them and there's 100. If you're looking at this map, and we didn't get this on here yet, but the colored dots, so if you're looking at this later, the purple dots, those are the parking that's eliminated during concept 3. The green reflects concept 2B and the blue concept 2A. But the numbers tell the story, really. It's just looking at the blocks and where they'd be eliminated, okay?
Suzanne might mention too that even if we just did concept 1 with the bulb outs, you lose a stall for each one of the bulb
You do,
outs.
yeah. In most of those locations,
Right.
you would lose your full parking spot for those bulb outs.
50 sounds like a big number.
Yes, it
I'm
does.
afraid we might be run out of town for making a
You might be.
decision
But
like
see,
that.
you're not making a decision. This is not a recommendation. These are elements to consider.
Yeah, just removing parking spaces. I mean, it's so tight anyway when you come downtown and people are looking for spaces. And so where do they go?
Yeah.
What would be the recommendation about where they would go? Around the block or side
Sure.
streets? Or
When you go to Walmart, you have to park several parking spaces away sometimes to get in. This would be similar to that. You'd park on a side
Or
street or behind and go in a back door. Now, you'll be glad to know that we are taking this similar presentation with these concepts to the public, and one of the groups that we have invited, all of them, Jen has helped us, and we have the downtown group that we'll be speaking with. We're doing a special presentation for that group. So they'll be able to give all kinds of comment, very similar to how we did in the original community engagement round. So the purpose is to have people talk. But remember, we would not be doing our job when looking at this transportation safety plan if we didn't bring all the options forward. It's okay that you are going to consider other things when looking at them. But you could say, well, you know what, if we don't have as many parking spaces downtown, then people aren't going to come downtown and we won't have to worry about it because there'll be less traffic. And we won't, but if we didn't provide these things, then somebody else is going to say, yeah, but everybody keeps getting hit. How come you aren't doing anything about it? So we're just trying to find a happy medium here. Okay? All
I
right.
have a couple questions.
Yes.
If we're talking broad concepts, is it possible to think about, rather than going from 4 to 5 lanes with a dedicated turn lane, is there any possibility to go to 3 lanes and like 1 lane each way and a dedicated middle and
Yes.
save parking? Or is that just
There
not a-
is, but the thing that you have to remember, and I think this will become very evident when you sit downtown in traffic and a train goes by, and then you
train.
remember, you got to have the stacking length, otherwise you're going to back people up clear down south of First Street and clear up to 12th Street. And because of the train factor,
Yeah.
I think that it is not good to consider.
Our team had thought about that because that notion of reducing, let's say you had like a 4-lane road, 2 lanes in each direction, of reducing that to a 3-lane with 1 lane in each direction with a center turn lane. That has significant, I was just looking at the numbers here, like 20 to 50% reduction in fatal and serious injury crashes. That has become very popular to handle kind of smaller volume roads or roads where it could handle that. And we had thought about that, but really this train crossing and the stacking up of cars on both sides, it just doesn't allow that.
Yeah, and your responses to some of these that people are going to be concerned with, they're all good. They're all okay. It actually makes me look good because I've been having these same responses saying, hey, people are going to be upset about this, but there's going to be the same amount of people that are going to say, hey, we've always wanted a downtown where you could have more pedestrian room and that kind of thing. So you as elected officials, eventually you'll have some issue brought before you, but encourage people to come to these community engagement events and these open houses, because that's where we'll hear what people have to say.
I think something that you probably should arm yourself, and I would have appreciated having for this meeting, is the number of parking spots that are within 1 block of
I think we may have
the
that,
establishment.
Rich.
Yeah.
I think
Well
we
as-
have that because we looked at them.
Not the bigger one that counts all the way over, 2 blocks away or whatever.
Yeah.
Even though it's heart healthy to walk that far.
Yeah.
It's just a reality. We need to know that information. And the other was, I don't know, it'll come to me. Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah.
When you were saying that, I was thinking it probably would also be helpful to have just like the number of total spaces.
Yeah.
So we're saying we're removing 50 or removing
That's the
100
other half of it.
out
Yeah.
of how many?
Because we're losing 100 on Main Street, but how many would we still have
Elsewhere.
elsewhere?
I think we have those numbers because we
Okay.
went through and looked at parking lots. So if not, that's something we can look at.
On any of these, did you look, especially when you're removing parking on one side or both sides, did you look at integrating a bike path or, a dedicated bike lane? Is that
We talked about that.
Is it possible, I guess, is what,
Well, it would be
Or is it-
possible, of course.
okay. I mean, that's additional space.
It is. And the reason, there's multiple reasons that we didn't look at it on K-15 directly. Over the years, the bicycling group in town definitely has called out other areas, other roads that were off of the main drag because there's so much vehicle traffic on K-15 on Main Street that they have, their bike route goes, to the east or the west of Main Street. And so if you're looking to make this a more pedestrian-friendly area, keeping your bicycles in the other area, we're just trying to separate out things and remembering the safety aspect too.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a great question. One of our activities in these upcoming open houses it's called a design charrette, and we're gonna, be able to take just an example stretch of roadway and say it's this wide, and and then we have little cutouts where you can say you can have 2 lanes that are 12 feet wide, and you can have a bicycle lane that's 3 feet wide, or you can have a sidewalk that's this wide, and just you can kind of play around and see what fits. Do you want to have 4 lanes of car traffic? Do you want to have 2 lanes of car traffic, a turn lane, and then a bicycle lane on both sides? So it's sort of a tangible way to sort of see we have set curb lines, and we're not going to move those. So kind of what can fit, what kind of configuration can fit in between.
My last question is if there are pros and cons to angle versus parallel parking, safety-wise and otherwise.
There are lots of studies that show that angle parking, you have more accidents when you have angle parking. The width that we have downtown plus the train there makes it difficult to have angle parking. Keep the number of lanes you need to be able to move traffic through after a train.
Yeah.
It would be difficult to do that. And then you look at angle parking. You have it on some of the side streets, but that's lower volume on the side streets than the traffic on Main Street.
I was recently in Lawrence and noticed that on Math Street they have all angle parking.
Yes.
2 lanes, I think maybe 2 in a dedicated turn, and then angle parking.
It's a little bit different because they have a lot bigger town with a lot more side streets, a lot other places that are happening, so. Okay. BNSF to First Street on Main Street. Same thing, concept 1 would be to do the bump outs, right?
And this is really a continuation of north.
It is.
North of the tracks.
And then the concept design 2A, same thing. You have the bump outs on one side, you eliminate parking on one side, add your turn lane, okay? And then 2B flips it to the other side. And then 3 eliminates all of the parking, leaves the turn lane, and widens the sidewalk space, okay? It's just like the piece to the north, okay? Okay. There is the slide must have got eliminated, but we can get it for you, that shows the number of parking spaces for this section too. I don't know what happened there. Okay, Washington Road. The concept design 1, this is from Southeast 10th to Southeast 8th. Again, the reason that we are looking at different areas is because there were accidents and crashes at all of these intersections. And due to the site distances, when you have multiple legs of an intersection, in this instance, you've got 5 as they are today, and you have vehicles coming up to that intersection. The sight distance for somebody that's looking clear back, say you're pulling up there on Pine Street and you're trying to look north on Washington, it's difficult to see for multiple reasons. Walnut, same thing at Southeast 10th and Walnut. The sight distances, the points of conflict, and crossing multi-lane facilities here are several of the reasons that we have accidents at these locations. So what we looked at was trying to put a cul-de-sac and dead-end one road that had another way out to eliminate one of the legs of the intersection. And we also have an element, remember, multiple elements. The other is turning this roadway into a 3-lane facility so that you have the dedicated left turn lane that would be running the distance here. Because right now you've got 4 lanes, but boy, those are narrow little boogers, right? And so this turns it into 3 with the 3rd lane for the turning. There are multiple locations at these intersections where we are looking at and giving an option. These are not recommendations, these are for talking about. The cul-de-sacs. And you look here at Pine, Indian Lane doesn't have another way out. So they still come out, right? Pine, you can go back to the north here by the ballpark and get out. And of course, to the south, Pine ties into the other cross streets and you could get out. So that's concept 1. This kind of gives you an aerial view so that you know what it would look like. They're just kind of fun when you can see a concept there, adding in cul-de-sacs. Okay. Okay. Then Washington Road from 5th to 1st. Same thing. Just at Allison, we'd be looking at putting in a cul-de-sac. And then from Southeast 3rd north to 1st Street, so that's the bottom picture here, we'd be adding in that protected left-hand turn and still necking down to only 1 lane in each direction with that protected turn. And in this area, the width would support those 3 lanes plus keeping some parking along the side. We wouldn't show the elimination. Where there is parking today, I believe you'd be able to keep it. But if this was selected, we would definitely look at that in more detail. Okay. All right. That's all of this. Those were the city concepts. We can quickly, we'll talk to you about the ones that we are proposing for in the county to be considered. And these will be available for people to look at the open houses because the open houses are open to everybody. So the first one is at Heston and Hoover Road. So Heston Road, you know, that's Old 81 that goes out of Newton up to Heston. And there are multiple intersections that have skewed crossings. And they are not just crossing Heston Road, but they're also crossing the railroad that's on the north.
Like not at a 90 degree.
Right.
Say
If they're skewed, they're not at a 90 degree, which is the preferred method for traffic and transportation safety so that you can see, so that you have good sight distance. And so if I'm gonna rebut this and say, well, why would we spend the money to do this? Why don't people just pull up here to this intersection and square their vehicle? Well, why don't people just drive the speed limit? Why don't people do all kinds of things? But we implement traffic safety measures so that we are helping to address those conflicts that occur on the transportation systems. And so there would be some right-of-way that have to be purchased. And this application at Heston Road, there are multiple crossings that this could be addressed on Heston Road at all of those crossroads to square it up, if you will. Okay. Then the next one is at, it's down by Sedgwick. This is Ridge Road and 84th Street. And if you've been on Ridge Road, you recall it, I'm sure, where you're coming up Ridge Road and then you do an immediate right turn, a 90-degree turn, and then another one back the other direction. There's accidents that occur in this area frequently. And that's what popped it up. Plus, people commented about this one in our community engagement. And so concept 1 for this location, it's the full bore. Look at it and straighten out the roadway. So there would be right-of-way acquisition, and then the road as it sits today for those that access and or live along there, this would come in then at a 90 to the new Ridge Road so that we don't create another problem, right? and stop signs here at this intersection. And that takes care of those oddball 90-degree turns. Now, there's another option, concept design 2. This doesn't straighten it all out, but this puts in signage. It really improves the signage at this location. It's called enhanced signage, and we have a bunch of these chevrons so these little arrowy looking signs that would have LED lights on them. And when you light that stuff up at night and we put in a bunch more signage that helps it be more visible to the driving public, just trying to light up this area so that people don't miss it at night, because a lot of times they happen at nighttime. And so this would be concept design 2. And we would have people comment on these and the different elements of these options at the community engagement. Questions on those? Okay. All right. Kristen?
Okay, we'll wrap us up here with the next steps. So like Suzanne had mentioned, we do have several engagement opportunities coming up. We've got on the slide here, and I also brought a few flyers if you're interested. So you can see we're having one with that list of the stakeholders. So like the stakeholder groups we had originally. So we're having one just for them on the 20th. And then like Suzanne mentioned, we're having a separate meeting with the Connect Downtown group. Just with that group, with the downtown business owners on the 27th. And then we've got some open houses, I guess that same week, taking place across really here within the city of Newton at the Rec Center, the Harvey County Courthouse, and at the library. So those are coming up. We will have some, like I mentioned, that design charrette where you can kind of practice trying to fit different things in a set volume. That's just kind of a fun thing and sort of a learning opportunity that, we can't have everything, that there are constraints. And so we'll see some property lines on there. And so just an opportunity for people to sort of experience trying to do this with constraints. Then we'll have some information about all these concepts, as well as some of the information about what we've learned previously and a way to kind of confirm we've heard correctly of some of the main themes coming out of that first session or that first engagement. And then just really wanted to share these next steps. We are in this study phase, this very, very first step where we're kind of getting ideas. We're talking about what are the problems, talking about some initial concepts. And so, we expect that to wrap up, this initiative to wrap up early next year. And then you can see there's sort of two paths. So one would be that top path is going through this capital grant application. That's really been the goal for this project all along. The goal from this original grant application from 3 or 4 years ago was to be able to set the city and the county up, should they choose to apply for a capital grant through this Safe Streets for All program. So that application would likely come open in the spring, and then probably be another year to have engineering, and then probably another year plus for construction. So this is a long timeline. So just want to reassure everyone, nothing's going to happen tomorrow. And then also kind of that second tier is to be able to go through the city's budget process, and should the city decide to implement some of these countermeasures or some of the low cost things, that would be another avenue for this to move forward. That's it. We are happy to answer any questions. I know we've talked through some during the presentation, but happy to answer any that you might have.
Tell us how that grant application works after all the studies are done, and maybe picking out some of the concepts to pursue and putting a price on them and all that. Then do you go to the federal government and say, okay, this is going to cost, let's just say, $7 million? And then is it a 90-10 split? Is it an 80-20 split?
Good question.
What does that look like?
It's an 80-20 split, so it's that's pretty common with federal grants. Here in Kansas, we're very fortunate because the state has allocated some of their ARPA money. Well, I think they switched out their ARPA money and anyways made a pot of money available they call Build Kansas. And they will offer to provide 15% of that 20% match requirement. And so that's a really great opportunity. I think we're the only state in the whole country that has that available. Otherwise, the individual city would have to come up with the whole 20%.
So then that means we'd be responsible for the 5%.
Correct.
Right.
Whatever that, yeah.
And I think that not just the SS4A type funds could you utilize your plan. There's other grants that are available that you could say, hey, look, we've had, because this is an engineering study, if you will, and you can say, hey, this is what this study came up with, and not just that grant application, but then the city could look at other grants that might be available for some of the pieces of the project as well. And those matches may be different.
Any other questions?
Ed, I thought, I may be confusing something. I thought there was also an idea of SS4A and traffic signals. Is that something separate on Main Street?
Depending on the project that we did, we could look at doing that.
Okay.
That's one thing I did neglect to mention in those concepts. So those Main Street concepts,
It would include some of
we would suggest, if you only chose the elements of the bulb outs, we would request funding for additional signals.
Okay.
It might not qualify for just bulb outs, but if you did some of the others, it definitely would, because you have to change up your protected lefts and everything. But I think we could probably justify that on any of those. So along with those physical
Yeah.
things on the roadway itself, we would be looking at signals as a part of that.
Okay.
So then is it that after going through all the next sessions with the public, and is it that whatever that comes back to are the ones that you're going to pursue to get, put all the costs together to what that's going to cost? In other words, not every one of these ideas is going to come with somebody putting a price tag on it.
Right.
Only the ones that this whole community decides might be feasible.
Yeah, we will include cost estimates, at least planning level cost estimates for these 5 concepts. So whatever the 5 end up being, I mean, we've got our 5 locations pretty much locked down, but the option within each 5 locations is not. So that's kind of the purpose of this next round, is we'll kind of hear from the public, take it for kind of final vetting with the city and the staff team, and then bring it back for final adoption. But whatever those 5 final concepts will be, we'll have planning level cost estimates. And then, of course, as it moves forward, those will continue to be refined as more information is known.
Awesome. Any other questions?
Okay, I
Thank you
guess
so
our
much.
last thing is we'll be back maybe later this year with a draft plan. Is that?
Yeah, you will need to adopt a plan. So a plan will be brought to you by staff for you to adopt, that then gets turned in as the final. And it will have concepts in it.
And can no action be a plan selected?
What do you mean, no action? Like not adopting it or not having concepts or?
Not adopting, say we choose not to do anything in that area. We're not obligated to take up any of the plans.
Correct.
No, you're approving a plan, not a construction
Okay.
project.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
So it's more of receiving a plan, more so than actually approving
is,
for
but-
action.
They want them to approve it. I mean, that's my understanding from the grant dollars. They want you to, this is our transportation plan, but you don't have to say in it what year you're going to accomplish these things. You're going to work towards things. And I think that's simple enough to do. Especially because I think in your minds, you're thinking about all these capital things. There's going to be countermeasures
Right.
throughout.
Right.
You know, if I would,
We could go benign and just adopt all the countermeasures as part of our plan with nothing that has a capital tag
Yeah.
to it.
but then you
Yes.
wouldn't need to apply for a grant. So, yeah. But
But we would be,
Definitely.
but we would be fulfilling the
Yes.
obligation of the grant that we received to have the study done.
Yes, absolutely. I don't know why why you and the county wouldn't approve in your plan, one of the things that you want to do moving forward is to promote use of seatbelts
Right.
and how much that decreases fatalities and severe accidents. I mean, just putting out some, public information about that. That would be something that should be in your plan.
Cool.
Okay.
All right, thank
Thank
you